Hello and welcome to this episode of the Nothing Ventured Primer with me, Ari Shah. Today in the studio with me, I have David Fogel. David is an operator turned VC turned operator, currently a fractional COO and venture partner at Zinc. David was previously COO and CCO at WeFarm, where he scaled the team to 150 people. Founder of ADV, an evergreen fund investing in VC funds, as well as B2B, B2C, and deep tech funds and startups. In 2019, David co-founded Alma Angels, one of the most well-recognized angel groups with a focus on investing in and supporting ambitious female founders. David, what a resume. Great to have you here in the studio with me.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Awesome. So look, let's kick straight off. Obviously in the primer episode, what we try and do is explore your background, your kind of resume getting up to where you are. It's obviously quite detailed. So hit us with it. What have you been up to over the last couple of decades?
So I think the problem is I'm old, so there's a lot to tell. Not sure if it's all interesting. Started my career in Israel. I went to a very geeky high school, so I ended up in a very geeky position, but I realized I don't like to code. So for those of you who are old enough, I learned assembly. Mm-hmm. So that's like proper green screen, mainframe type of thing. Basically in Israel, military is mandatory. So spent 4 years in the Navy on a battleship, never fired a missile in my life. Did a lot of...
There's still time.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what I want to do in the next decades. But basically, electronics, computer, and defense system. After 4 years doing that, I realized that not really interesting. They offered me 17 years career, and I was like, thank you, but let's do something else. Started in Bachelor in Economics, a Master in Law, and basically a friend of mine approached me, said, hey, I have an IT company, and we're thinking about moving into building software for the financial industry. As a student, I worked for a pension fund, and I was like, yeah, I know tech, I know finance a bit, said the guy that didn't have any experience in finance, but jumped in and basically took a team of 3 people and spent 5 years building. In our language today, it's B2B fintech, and moved into telco. Mm-hmm. So sold for a huge organization, but overall ended up building about 15 different products. That was the early 2000s. So most of it was just taking stuff online and making it secure because people didn't have any accessibility to anything, and learning how to sell to banks, insurance companies, and so on. And after I did that for 5 years, I realized that I really liked the 0 to 1, but I'm not the idea guy. So I never considered myself as a founder with like a vision to do anything, but I do consider myself as the get shit done type of guy. And you can say with a lot of naivety, I said, well, that's what VCs do, right? They back people with ideas and just help them get shit done. I was like, let's become an investor. So I actually then left Israel, again, within the many mistakes. For some reason, I thought doing an MBA is a good way to go into venture. Mm-hmm.
It seems to be the on-ramp for a lot of people.
There's I think we need a different podcast about how MBAs actually impact career. It was a great decision at the time because it opened it up for me. I never worked outside of Israel. It opened up a huge network. I think there's a whole pet peeve, but MBA don't actually educate you to a level that brings you anything, but open up your network.
It is all about the network. I mean, actually in Gujarati, which is the language from where I'm from originally, we say MBAs are mane badu avre, which means I know everything. And it's kind of just this this piss take of the fact that, you know, a lot of MBAs, especially young MBAs, haven't had the experience, but come out basically assuming that they know everything, but often don't.
No, but again, it's like, I think everybody at some, like, going through that experience and getting slapped by reality is, if you're taking it, if you take it in the right way. But then I managed to hustle my way. So a great professor was leading the venture lab at IE Business School in Spain. That's where I did it. He's an ex-entrepreneur, American lawyer turned entrepreneur in Spain. And basically managed to convince him to hire me to do that with him. And that basically got me to how to run an accelerator in a university with a budget. Ended up doing conferences and basically networked the shit out of a European VC. That was 2010.
How many were there? There can't have been that many, I guess.
So between Israel, Europe, and US, I managed to pull about 200 people over a 2-year period. But the idea was, okay, let's go into VC. And that's how I ended up basically out. And still I think I have the Excel somewhere. I met 147 VCs within 8 months. The 148 said, okay, let's come in. So got an internship and an associate role. The challenge was this was post 08. So them raising the second fund suddenly took a lot longer.
Yeah.
And suddenly after 6 months, I was like, well, we can't because we'll need another year for second fund. And I was like, okay, so what do I do now? Network, did some research, ended up with an M&A position in Germany. So there's a lot of discussion on how you take decisions, but the moment I knew that I was going to be a VC, my thesis was I need to be in a position that I have access to people with money and entrepreneurs will choose me because I bring value.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of offers on the table, but this one in Germany was about M&A, which is the end cycle of a venture. So like learning and connecting to the big guys with money, how they buy, how they sell. And I spent 3 years in Hamburg, Germany, but mostly doing cross-border across Europe with an office in China and the US. So got exposed to the end cycle of how like huge corporates basically diversify their portfolio or
how startups exit, essentially. Yeah.
Basically. But also spend a lot of time working with those corporates. Okay, so how do we engage with startups? How do we bring innovation? Building that for like defense startups, companies with like multi-billion-dollar budgets, or work with Siemens on their early stage innovation in buildings. So like really exposed to how those type of companies do that. And then that professor that I talked to you about ended up leading Wayra and be the first guy, Gary Stewart, that started Wayra in Spain. And then he moved to manage it in the UK. And he was like, he needed a great person to run the accelerator. And I was like, excellent. So it was the right timing after 3 years in Hamburg doing that with corporates. Ended up leading the corporate for Telefonica, corporate early stage investing in Accelerate. That was 2014, end of 2014, moved over, spent roughly 3 years doing that, investing, building partnerships with GCHQ, MSD, ASOS, running different accelerations. So super experience in like working that balance. And I was lucky enough and met a couple of partners that we really gelled on how we think about the vision of what venture should be. And during, by the end of 2016, raised about 150 million pounds for ADV, an early stage vehicle to invest in seed and pre-seed startups in the UK. And then in the end of 2016, started ADV, spent about 4 years doing that, deploying the money, investing both in funds like Seed Camp, EF, but also in amazing startups. WeFarm was actually one of them. And after 4 years, realized, I know you have a question, we can dig a bit deeper into that, but like with any kind of relationship, let's say my partners and I didn't see eye to eye to how to move forward.
Got it.
Decided to take a step back, and then Kenny said, perhaps you stop just giving advice on the board. Kenny's the founder of WeFarm, and actually start doing what you're going to talk about. And started as a COO at WeFarm, and spent 2 years there. Fortunately, had to close WeFarm down end of 2022, and that's how we got here.
Amazing.
That was long.
That was not long, but because we're going to dig into a bunch of that stuff later. And I mean, obviously an eclectic journey. I think the other thing that stands out to me is, we have this image of the Israeli and Hebrew kind of Jewish diaspora. It feels like you are kind of the epitome of that, having been in Israel, Spain, Germany, back now in the UK. And I think, that whole kind of migratory story is also really, really interesting, and that kind of desire to.
So just to complicate that, I was actually born in Romania.
Oh, even
we
better.
Immigrated to Israel when I was 5. So just to cover the.
So went Aliyah and then came back again. Yeah. Okay, great, got it. So look, just before we wrap up the primer, I'll often ask guests kind of. What they're investing in and so on. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about Alma in the main episode. But it'd be great to understand from you, 3 or 4 startups that you are looking at that you're really interested in at the moment, and why, I guess.
So it's good that you send me the questions in advance because I can prepare. I think...
Don't give away the secrets.
I think that's actually a good example for everybody doing pods. Please do that more. I think really like the way I look at investing is a lot, and you probably hear that a lot about founders and all that. So I'm not going to bore you into that because all the founders I'm looking at are amazing.
That's kind of the base stakes, like table stakes.
What amazing is depends on the person, how much you actually seen. But I think really interesting for me, there's a great one in Germany called BINA, BINA. And it's basically a new approach to schooling, education, a new edtech startup. The founder actually sold her business in the past, went on a trip 6 years, interviewing parents and teachers in about 50 countries, and was thinking about how to realign the entire educational system, and created a startup that says we can do it online, not necessarily Zoom, building her own tools. And she last year piloted basically 14 students, 2 classes. They are scored, I think, top 5%.
Amazing.
On all, and managed to do it in an engaging manner where the kids choose to be 6 hours a day online. And one of the really interesting things is because it's remote, she's done it as a diverse class that is based on the time zone, not on location.
Yep.
So there are kids literally like Finland, Germany, and all that within one class, learning and talking and enjoying in English, and actually getting the outcome. So that's really interesting one. A second one, you mentioned Zinc. So these are 2 startups that literally just came out of Zinc. One, it's semi-stealth mode, so I'm not going to talk too much about how they do it, but Sterling Bioengineering. And what they basically realize is that if you actually look at all the innovation happening around the food, so we're talking about dairy products and meat products, a lot of it requires bioreactors to do that. But if you actually look at the demand of bioreactors were invented about 100 years ago to do medicine.
Very inefficient.
Inefficient on a whole new level.
And,
we're talking
large.
about 300,000 liters comes in to create something like 100 milliliters output. It's great when you price that 100 milliliters for $1 billion because you sell medicine, but if you actually use that to produce meat or any type of dairy substance, it's not really efficient. More importantly, if you actually take all the bioreactors today in the world, put them into one space and try to feed Manhattan, you're able to do that for about a month.
Wow.
Not even, I think.
Yeah.
Don't catch me on the numbers, but that's, and the thing is, if you
the point is you can't do much. Yeah.
And the really interesting, if you actually dive deeper, is that 60% of the things that we actually eat can be produced in bioreactors.
Yeah.
There's a huge barrier because the entire system is not efficient.
Yeah.
Steve and Akshay are taking that and redesigning the entire approach, and if it works, it's basically the picks and shovel for the entire aspect of industry.
Yeah.
Pharma as well, but we're talking about feeding the populations on a whole different level.
Yeah, and especially as we get into periods where, there's now talk of an mRNA vaccine for cancer coming out within the next 10 years or less, and cures for malaria, etc.
So here's an interesting fact that I learned while talking to them. Today, if you actually have a cancer cure and you want to start producing with bioreactors, somebody needs to kick out an existing customer for the next, literally kick out, get sued by them, deal with that, only to produce your cancer medicine. So like if you're able, and again, a lot of people trying to do bioreactors and most of them looking at biology.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to see like a complete innovative approach that will like 100x the solution if it works.
Amazing.
So as it's like edtech, bio, this is a completely thing. The third one is actually also came out of Zinc. FIBA is focused on the fashion industry, and it's Sarah and Varun. Sarah comes from years in fashion. Varun comes from India, working with farmers, and they're basically a mashup of like founder market fit that only the 2 of them can solve this. Because if you look at the fashion industry, really interesting challenge is, like everybody in sustainability, the goal is to reduce. The problem is to actually have sustainable fabrics. There's nothing there in the world. There's a lot of cool innovations about, mushrooms taking like a strong material, but actually if you try to scale that,
It's very hard. We're actually working with a company that I think pivoted from mycelium, from mushrooms, for exactly that reason. Yeah.
And the challenge, and if you talk to the fashion brands, they were like, listen, the price is X. Anything sustainable that is actually sustainable, because cotton isn't, but anything that is sustainable usually is 3 to 5x.
Yeah.
So even the fashion, like the high end fashion, it's not worth it. I can't.
It's too expensive. Yeah.
And they're able to take an existing process with bananas and basically create the goal is to create a fabric that costs roughly half an X within 3 to 5 years at mass production.
Amazing.
And that connection of his connection insights on the industry in India, her connection insights on the customer and the brand, and basically 10 years of it or 15 years of experience on both ends meet in the middle.
Yeah. Perfect.
Like amazing. Yeah. It's not purely software. It's literally logistics, operations, and like.
But so many of the great startups at the moment are atom based rather than bits based, right? Like, I mean, there are more and more coming out with.
But this is like software eats the world is nice, but if you actually look at climate or you look at something fundamental where there wasn't proper infrastructure investment, we need to go through that. It has to be bricks and mortar. It has to be like hardware that changes. And that's where I think where the next leap is.
And not only that, but software is starting to eat software. But that's a whole different podcast as well.
That's generative, right?
Yeah, exactly. So David, this is great. We're going to get deep into a few of these questions in the main podcast. But for the meantime, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Looking forward.